Hey, welcome to the latest episode of the Poke Popcast. We have with us today our guest, Yves Roundtree. Yves is an amazing international man of mystery of Pokemon. He has been involved in this game pretty much since the beginning or close to it, and has been all over the place and has been involved in all levels and is just an amazing guy. I call him the Mexican Jackie Chan.
I like that moniker, by the way.
So Yves, let's get a little background here. So you and I met, I guess, back in some of the early World Championships or maybe the early U.S. Nationals. I don't even remember which was the first time we met, but you got involved. Obviously, you're in Mexico and we're involved with. Were you involved back in the WotC days, which is the Coast days before Pokemon took over?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I have been involved from the very start, but at start I was more a player than a judge. Back in the day, I was enamored with the game. I started, as most of us did, like you were actually probably a little bit earlier than I was judging. I started judging around 2000, more like judging and tournament organizing.
No, that's about the same time I started.
Yeah, I started with Baset. I still remember the first rare card that I pulled from a pack. Oddly enough, I think it was very prophetic. It was an Imposter Professor Oak, which is what it wasn't a card you wanted to pull from a pack, but well. So I was back in the day playing. I remember distinctly, and this is kind of like the gauging that I use, is that I was doing tournaments and the prize was Neo Genesis booster boxes. So that locates me, my organizer history around 2000.
Right.
Playing it was around probably 1999 as the game started. I did get to work with you, well, not work with you, but I met you in 04 at US Nationals.
Right.
It was funny because I was playing US Nationals that year. I had already staffed a US event. My first event was a Gym Challenge, the Texas Gym Challenge, which was a coordination event between Vince Kreckler and Professor Birch, who at the time was an organizer from Texas, very well known at the time. And the first event that I staffed with you was World So 4. I believe you were either seniors or masters. I was juniors under Kim. So
yeah, I remember. I'm trying to remember back then. I know I judged in the last chance qualifier they had then. I judged the junior last chance qualifier and they had like 9 competitors.
Oh yes, everyone, like literally they just told.
And it was like, and there was one kid who was like, oh, I'm gonna drop. His mom was like, oh, he's gonna drop now. I'm like, he may want to play the last match.
Yeah,
you play the last match and you get all the big bag of goodies.
Oh yeah, and I remember people were angry because people had been competing the whole season, and I think it was all juniors and seniors were told like, you're just into World, like you're playing, go into it.
Yeah, they wanted to up the numbers of juniors because that was the big thing. Was masters could afford to travel on their own. Some seniors could talk their parents into it, but most juniors, unless the parents were into it, they weren't going to travel.
Yeah, totally. It was trying to get as much people involved because we were coming off a little bit of a decline that we had with the change from Wizards.
Yeah.
Everybody thought that the game was going to die. I'll be honest, I was also a little bit hesitant about the future of the game.
Yeah, well, that's why Skyridge boxes are worth so much now because there's so few of them in circulation. The number that were sold was so low.
Equally with Legendary, no, what was the one with the really weird foil, Legendary Collection?
Yeah.
That was also super small printed. I remember we had a hard time getting a hold of those boxes in Mexico. For my set, it was really hard, but people were just dropping from the game left and right. So it was a strange time at the time. By that moment, you were already well known. I mean, you were already Pokepop. You had staffed a world championship and a tropical mega battle. Well,
no, I didn't. I actually had been invited to the Wizards World Championship, but I didn't go. And nobody was invited to the Tropical Mega Battle.
Yeah, that was. I remember that one. That one was kind of when everyone started thinking international, and that's also kind of like my stepping point. The second one, the World Championship, because at the time I was a very highly ranked player in the world. I was a top player in Mexico, and I theoretically had enough points to be invited into the first World Championship, and I was not. I was kind of expecting to be, but at the same time knew that I was not gonna be. There's been a history of not taking into consideration players from smaller markets in general. And
this was the Pokemon one in 2004 or the
no, the Wizards one in 2002.
Okay. Yeah.
And at that point, I actually sent a mail to Wizards just out of curiosity, like, "Hey guys, I'm really high ranked in the world. I would like to know why there was no consideration for me to attend the World Championship." And they were really honest with me, and they told me, "Hey Yves, we see your points, but there's not really any judge or organizer that we trust in Mexico for Pokemon at this point. So for all we know, you could be playing the tournaments like with yourself in your basement. There is no way for us to vouch into the reality or legality of your tournaments."
Wow.
Yeah, at least they were honest. And that was a huge push for me, because from that point on, I retired as a player. I had a really good 2.5-year run. And I said, I don't want ever to be a moment in which a Mexican player deserves a spot at a World Championship and he doesn't get one. So I started just judging and trying to raise my profile. We had that second level in Wizards, the Master Professor. And then I think we were all grandfather at the same time when TPCI came in. Well, at the time it was not TPCI, it was just PUSA Inc.
Right.
And that's my starting point. I started going to events, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, they gave the professors from the Wizards of the Coast an early chance to get an ID. So that's why. What's your ID number?
Oof, that's one of the crazy stories, and it really rubbed me the wrong way, because in those days, you probably will remember, we were assigned 3 different IDs. Well, depending on your involvement, number of roles that you were involved, you had up to 3 different player IDs. So you had a one for you as a judge, one for you as a league, and one for you as a tournament organizer.
In Pokemon?
Yeah, at the very start, at least internationally.
Okay, I wasn't, to be honest, I wasn't an organizer at the beginning, so I only had a player ID, I guess.
So I had all 3 of them, because they were kind of like dismembered, like they had their own tree for everything. And I had numbers 20, 21, and 273. Huh. So I was really proud of my 2-number digit. It was super low. I was one of the first ones to be. Apparently, international was actually grandfather in before, because the United States got a very large list. That's also why Skill also has a super low number compared to Crispo. Crispo is one of the first American ones to be, because of the.
Yeah, Crispo's is like 30-something, right?
Something like that. I think like 66 or something like that, because that's my favorite number. He has something like crazy slow, and so I was really proud of my number. And then they consolidated all numbers into one. My league is 269, I think. So my numbers are really low, but I really like the 20. But they consolidated into the top one.
Right,
at the time. Right. I remember at Worlds, I asked Eric Bessette, who's the guy who does the Tom and back in the day was called TMS, the program. And I asked him, "Hey, can I have my number back? Like it really is kind of like bragging rights and whatnot." And he was like, "Okay, let's see. I have this on my table. Make sure that Tom works. Changing Yves' number. Which is more important?" And also, I was told afterwards that they were
making Yves' number low is more important.
Yeah, but well, for me, but no, and they had a good reason. Apparently, they tried to start clearing down the lower numbers for admin use later. Right now, there's no one using the number or anything, but all the very low numbers have been blocked. So currently, I'm using a 3-digit number, but my original was.
Yeah. Well, I waited a bit, but I didn't like jump in right away like Crispo and get the really 2-digit number. I got, I think his is still a 2-digit number, but I got a 360, which I'm happy with. It's a nice round number.
Yeah, it's actually a lot of people don't get that. It's not so much about having a low number, but having a really nice thing. 360 is a perfect number. Like you're all around.
I had a judge whose number was 333. I said he was half evil.
I like that number too. I wouldn't mind having that one either.
Yeah. So, okay, so you decided to get involved in organizing because Wizards at the time, and I guess Pokemon coming into that didn't have a good trust in who was there organizing things. And like I said, I wasn't an organizer back at that time. I didn't start organizing until around Power Keepers is when I became an organizer. But so how did that all work back in the early days? Pokemon, did they have a distributor down there? How did that work?
At first, it's been a really strange road because I've played so many different roles for the company. At that point, Wizards had a distributor in Mexico, Necro Tower was the name. So everything was filtered through them, but they didn't have a lot of interest in Pokemon. And when they moved from Wizards back into Pokemon as a brand, there was a vested interest, or rather, they were in revenge mode because they didn't want Pokemon to do well. They had this mindset that Magic had to be the only game that was doing well in Mexico.
Kind of how Wizards had the same mindset.
Yes. Oh, at least that's the perception that I got from international.
Pretty much, yeah.
So they actively tried to boycott us. I remember distinctly the first national champion. It wasn't still named a national championship in 04 for us because the first one was a gym challenge in Mexico. But I remember that the head guy from the company was literally standing at the door because we for marketing reasons we used the same weekend for the World Qualifier in Mexico, and there was, I think, a Magic whatever event. I don't know if it was a pro tour or a pre-release or something, but they ended up being the same day. And that guy, he was overseeing his event, but he was standing in the door. And when people would come in and ask about the Pokemon event, he would tell them, "Oh no, it's been canceled."
Oh wow.
Yeah, and it's difficult because since they were different companies, there was really no recourse for me to kind of like. At that point, we just had people hanging by the banner, and then like, no, it's there, go there, or whatever. And when we were around, he was not actively trying to, like, it was not a direct fight. But when he was on his own on the door, he was just directing people off the site. And we're talking 2004. Smartphones weren't a thing, at least in Mexico at that point. So
yeah.
If someone would just come there and they were turned out away, they had no way of knowing, oh, no, I can come back. We lost them for the day.
Wow.
Yeah, very lovely people there. But also at that point, Pokemon they had not fully consolidated as a company. So they were using Nintendo at that point for distribution.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of strange. I had been working with them because I was staffing their booth for. We have an E3 equivalent, or used to have. It died a few years ago, called EGS, Electronic Game Show, here in Mexico, and it was kind of like the equivalent for Mexico and Latin America for that one. We would have booths and stuff like that, and I had been running the
like
Nintendo. Yeah, and they had two booths. They had a TCG one because they were trying to start like bring as many people as they could, and I had been running their booth for a couple of years, so I already had a little bit of contact with the company at that point. And at that they were like, "Hey, can't you start running this?" And they just started putting more and more tournaments in the plate. And at one point, the best point that we had in Mexico, we were having 20-25 city championships and 6 to 8 state championships, which at the time we were the second largest tournaments in the world. Just after the US, we had even better numbers than Japan.
So, what was your relationship at that point? Were you like independent, or were you employee of them, or how did that work?
That's a really also a very interesting case because they brought us all into, we're contractors to some degree or the other, but the level in which we had been involved and the NDAs that we have been assigned throughout the years have changed. So I was kind of like in a middle point. I had a lot of control over the country. I literally run the entire country. There was another organizer in Mexico up north, Jorge Rodriguez. But aside from him, I ran literally the efforts in the entire country, which isn't extremely large, but still it's a sizable amount. So sometimes I was brought in to do work, like for example, the work that I did for the booth for Nintendo. And throughout my career with them, I've been brought in to do other stuff, like when I was coordinating the Pokken events a few years ago. So never fully internally, but I had far more control than the average PTO. And
Uh-huh.
and at one point I was also an official distributor. I was the official distributor for Pokemon for the TFG game, which I thought it was going to be my ticket into huge stuff. And
Yeah.
then the game kind of died on us. We had it came in the time of the scare of the lead
You got like a
paint.
garage full of trading figures, or?
I used to, yeah. The problem, and again, you never know when something's going to be a huge hit after a few years. Had I known that TFG was going to raise in value as in a future installment, I would have kept a lot of them. You never know with Pokemon when something's gonna become super expensive afterwards.
Yeah,
I
yeah. It's funny. I was one of the Japanese guys. Was at Worlds. I brought the Japanese uh, player set, one of the early player sets, pink and green or whatever it is,
mm-hmm.
which had the all the special cards like Bulbasaur and the cards were numbered. And I showed it to him, sealed. And he says, "Oh, I have a garage full of those." It's like, meanwhile, this thing here goes for hundreds. Who knows at this point, maybe close to $1,000 a box, and he's got a garage full of them.
Yeah. And same with the thing that pops to mind is Pop 5 packs. Pop 5, at that time, it was fun. Well, not funny. They kind of dropped Mexico from the Professor program because they couldn't ship stuff to us. That's the history of Mexico. The whole time, customs is always an issue. So they canceled the Professor program from Mexico, and every professor got sent as to. We all had points, so they canceled our accounts and sent us packs to make up for the points, and all of them were Pop 5 packs.
Oh,
But
those the good ones with the
yes,
Eevee and the
the Umbro and the Espen Star, yes. But the problem is that at the time they weren't that expensive, so everyone was getting rid of them.
yeah.
And since there were so many circulating in Mexico, we kind of like got rid of a lot of them. Now they're going like, especially right now, they're going from anywhere from $150 to $200. Had I known, oh God, I wish I had known.
You got rid of them all?
No, I still have a few, and I let go of them little by little. They actually help a lot with helping with cost to travel to tournaments, which is something we'll probably get to a little later.
Right.
So yeah, it's crazy how some of that stuff. I wish we wouldn't be able to know at the time.
That is crazy. Well, yeah, so that's a good transition then. So you're like one of the most traveled people I know. You go, Eves travels to events all around the world, so he's experienced how things are done pretty much all over the world. How have things changed in recent years? Because we've been talking here about the PTO days, and for those who aren't familiar, back before the current way things are done. Pokemon had a relatively small group of people who were assigned regions and areas. For example, my region was South Jersey. Other people, Eves pretty much was like most of Mexico. And a few years ago, when they shifted from city championships and state championships and things like that, and they transitioned to the new system doing league challenges and league cups, they transitioned away from these PTO premier tournament organizers to lots and lots of more local organizers. And we had regionals, and we still have regionals now. So that's probably about the one thing other than Worlds that stayed the same. But you've had a lot more experience with how that has affected things worldwide. What kind of things have you seen worldwide? As you mentioned back in the day, Mexico was not well run because there was nobody that they trusted, and then you came in and they trusted you. But other parts of the world, what things have you seen, and how have things changed?
Oof, I think that a lot has changed. The thing that really stood up to me from the start was that the first few years we were kind of trying to learn how the company wanted us to run things, and the only place where we actually got to learn a little bit of that was Worlds. That used to be the grounds in which we would soak up on all the knowledge from Japan and from the company. And then we would use the PTO channel to try to funnel that into all the communities. But that was mostly an American thing because 90% of the staff was from the US. So I noticed early on that internationally, the biggest complaint that we used to have at Worlds was when players would come in and we would rule something that we have been ruling it like that for the entire year or something like that. And they would retort with, well, that's not how it's run in my country. And well, the fact that it's run like that in your country does not mean that we have to adhere to your rules here. That just means that we need to make sure that in your country, they know what is the proper way to be running things. So I tried early on. It was difficult because traveling and again, smartphones have completely changed the landscape of traveling and stuff. I tried trying into as many international events as possible, just to try to, my original dream was to equalize at least the base knowledge that we would have, so that there wouldn't be such a huge change from different countries into attending international events. And it took me a little longer than I thought that it would, but at the end I started being able to travel. For example, the first project was Canada. Canada had a huge issue one year, and a lot of the judges just decided to stop judging like altogether. And it was a perfect time for us to jump in. Also, the Ohio group, shout outs to the Ohio group. We started traveling to Canada Nationals and trying to funnel all that knowledge into the judges of Canada. And that was a good stepping stone. And then I started traveling to Europe and same thing, trying to like, hey guys, because there was nothing that irritated me more than having to use the legendary, because that's how we run it at World's excuse. People would say, hey, why do you run this way? And we would just tell them, oh, because this is how we were told at Worlds to do it. Because two things would happen at that point. It was an appeal to authority, which is a fallacy.
Yeah.
Like, and the second part
you want things documented.
Yes. And also because it was kind of like a derogatory for other people. Like, hey, if you were not at Worlds, you are not really into this. And the staff for Worlds used to be fairly small. You remember 04, 05, or 6. Staff for Worlds was, I think that if we were like 20, 25, that's
it's crazy how small the picture is for that. I'll post the picture of the staff.
Yeah, so I wanted it to be to start treating nationals more of the little world for everyone, because not everyone could attend Worlds, or not everyone at the time was super exclusive even as staff. The biggest change that I've seen throughout the years is a little bit of dealing with the players, the culture of the players, which is still a big thing in the game. Not all cultures approach the game in the same way. And we've been trying for many years to be accommodative of that one. We try to accommodate the culture of different groups into the game. But as we have been able to, pardon the pun, flatten the curve on the experience of different countries, we don't have to give different players a different experience. You try not to change too much how you apply penalties, because you try to keep it an even field for everyone.
Okay. So you're traveling around all these countries, like helping spread good practices, which is great. But I mean, you basically are funding that yourself, or how are you able to have you been able to break even doing that? Or
it's always a little bit difficult. You get different amounts of support from different organizers, and you try trying to come in out of the red in tournaments. It's almost impossible. So you actually try to analyze at the start of the year. I actually do a breakdown of what events I'm able to more easily get to, and it will be a little bit cheaper. But at the same time, I take the support, because there's some events, the larger events like the ICs or Worlds, in which we have a little more support than other events. So you can funnel a little bit out of those into your events. Then some organizers are able to bring you in, or you try to broker some deal with them. For example, one year with Brazil, I was very lucky, in which I suggested that I would pay my way for a regional, and they said, okay, so for us, it's like if we bring you in for the IC, then it would be kind of like paying half for each one of the tournaments. So you just have to be smart about the way you go about the whole season, because my whole thing is that I try to hit as many tournaments as possible. And some, especially the ones in markets that are smaller, they will not be able to help you as much as other regionals that are larger or have bigger attendances. So you just try to add all the totals in one side, and all the subtractions on the other one, and try to not think about it in terms of a single tournament, because that way every tournament, you wouldn't go to tournaments that are a big loss. But if you average all the tournaments during the year, and if you may be able to balance it out, then at the end of the day, it's easier to make it all work. So I guess it's a mixed effort. Some events are, you get a little more than others.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the whole idea of being able to live off as a judge is not exactly.
No, it's definitely a labor of love.
Yes, that's a big thing, and shout out to all the judges out there, because you know this, and it has been getting better in these years. But back in the day, we used to work 16-hour work days.
Oh,
Like,
yeah. It's you wake up, you get to the event, you work through the event, you eat dinner and go to bed. That's about all you have time for.
and sometimes not even that. I remember around, I think that we're talking probably around the mid 2000s or late 2000s, in which we would finish worlds around 11 or 12 p.m. a.m. at that point, obviously. And we would be there back at 6 a.m. So we would be working 16-17 hours and sleep just 2-3 hours and be back the next day.
Yeah. Well, it really ramped up when they started adding all the side events. Back for the first few ones where there weren't really that many side events, it was a much more relaxed event, especially Worlds. National was still busy, but Worlds was a little more relaxed. But then once they added in all the side events, it definitely became, like you said, nonstop, 3 or 4 days in a row.
Yeah, I remember that afterwards, everyone would need like 1 or 2 days off just to catch the breath.
Yeah. So you pretty much started doing that on your own. That was before organized play, and I'll give a shout out to Becca, who became an organized play manager and kind of was assigned for non-US initially for the judge program, and she really stepped up what they were doing with the judge program and training and support and all that. You've been involved in that somewhat. How did you see the transition with what Becca brought in and started doing?
That was very interesting because again, we kind of tried to take whatever we had at the time. You were one of the pioneers with seminars, but we were kind of limited to seminars at US Nationals, at Worlds. At first, those were the two hotspots in which we could kind of do this kind of thing. And one of the first things that was brought into the table was expanding seminars into other places and other countries. So at the time, I was lucky that I've already been part of a couple of the seminars. You've been involved in that far more than I had at that point. And if I was traveling to other places, I could bring a little bit of that model that had been used in the US into other countries. So we started having, with a lot of success, the seminars into other countries. And we moved from there. At first, it was just once a year into the countries. And then they realized that they could host them with regionals. And so then every country started to have 2, 3, 4 seminars a year. And we started just racking up seminars. And that was kind of like the entry point into the modern training ground for judges, because now we currently do at least a dozen seminars of official seminars in the US, and at least a good 15 worldwide. But we also run a lot of efforts that are not necessarily 100% approved, but are also training grounds. We have, even in some regionals, when they don't have like an official seminar, they will still have a session in which we will just do that one. I remember distinctly Canada. Canada was probably one of those efforts. I remember that we're talking around 2013, 2014, in which we would just have like a round table, and AJ, me, Mikey would just sit down and hey guys, um, this is kind of like not a seminar, but open up for any questions that you may have. We'll answer them. There were people that were not going to be staffing the event, but were professors. So that was a big change. And then we started making it more official because we started with not grading, but we started evaluations. We started doing the evaluations, which was a little bit of a difficult transition, because given that the whole professor program is a volunteer effort, it's very difficult to tell someone that is putting so much time, effort, love, and even money into this to tell them, hey, you're doing great, but and then this is the field in which we would like you to improve. It's very difficult. It's not like other games in which it was a very, very direct structure to begin with. So that was one of the other things. And finally, we got into the next level into teaching, which has been the mentor initiative, which has been done now for the last couple of years, which was a very difficult change of planning, so to speak. We completely changed the scope of what we were doing. To go from judging and making sure that stuff is happening there, to take a step back, to see how they're doing it, and it doesn't matter if they're doing it right or wrong. But after that, you can come up to the judges and tell them, hey, maybe for next time you could consider doing this, but also you are a little bit of a beacon, because if they have a question and like, hey, how has this been handled in other places, or what's your thoughts on these? But
Right.
we're not officially gonna give them the answer, because that's a head judging perk, that they are the one that will decide. But we are people that they can bounce ideas off. I remember you being one of the first mentors in a regional with I think it was Philadelphia, like 2 years ago. That was one of the first times that a mentor role had been given out of in a non-PTCI capacity, and it was just great having you around. And hey, how would you handle this? Like, steer us in the right decision.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was that's always that was a lot of fun doing that. Basically, kind of hard to stand back and not step in and say no, wait. But yeah, yeah,
It's just overall a completely different approach, and it took us a little bit of time finding because even like they grabbed a bunch of judges that were experienced, and they thought, okay, these guys will be perfect for mentoring, but it's a different profile than from a head judge. So we had some judges that would outright come out and say, no, I don't think this is my cup of tea. I would like to still be on the ground working the judge rounds. But at the same time, a lot of the others understand that. I think that for us that been doing this for so long, it's clearly easier to be a judge, because it's something that's been hard coded in our DNA. And sitting back and taking that less active role, it's very difficult. But we understand that we need to prepare more judges, more premier level judges. That's something that the game requires now with the explosion in attendance. We just need more judges that are better prepared to handle the load of work that we have been getting.
yeah.
So you have to take one for the team sometimes, and just help the community grow in other aspects and ways.
Well, I think the quality of judging has really improved over the years. You can definitely see. I mean, I remember in the early years, 2004, 2005, whatever, I'd be running around helping people with all kinds of rulings that now just everyone can do. I wouldn't have to help anyone with a ruling like that. Now it's more higher level stuff. So it's really good to see that you can depend on the basic judge who has some experience being able to handle a range of stuff dependably and give the players a consistent experience.
Yeah, I think that also we started branching out, and I think at first we all were kind of like cut out with the same scissors. We had all kind of like the same shapes of judges, but as we expanded and we had more judges, we could start realizing that some people were better for different tasks. I mean, assistant head judge was not even an official thing back then. We were just like a head judge, and everyone else was just judges. Now we have seen that we have different profiles in judges, and we have judges that are really good at what I call encyclopedic knowledge. They know the rules. They literally just know the rules by heart. And then we have guys that are really good with player management, which has been the biggest change in the direction of judging. Judging used to be, you have to know the rules because nobody really knows the rules because they weren't all like as well spread as they are now. So now we have people that can fill different roles, and we have newer roles that have been established in the last couple of years, like end of round judges or deck checking specialists. We had to make, back in the day, everyone had to do a little bit of everything. Now we can kind of like place them in the spots that they will excel at. And that's been really interesting to help grow the program. But as you mentioned, also the players are very, very more into rules that they were in back in the day. So rules knowledge has become a secondary thing because there's so many places that we can actually check now for the compendium, obviously plug for the Pocket Compendium. But now they can even go to different FAQs, or they can go to the documents that you have a couple of documents back in the Pokegym that are really good for readings for both judges and players. So the big thing now is player management and fixes. Fixes is a huge thing. Like, yeah, we know that the game state is broken. How are we going to fix it now? And also, it's been difficult because there has been so many changes into ways in which we handle some of the calls. That's also been one of the things that I know that full consistency will never be achieved because the judge work is a little bit subjective, but we have a baseline. But the handling of fixes has been something that we've tried to kind of keep kind of consistent, but it would change from a year to other depending on who was handling that specific role within the company.
Right.
So we would get a little bit of like, for example, at nationals, we would get told, hey, handle it this way, or we would ask, hey, is it okay if we handle it like this?
Right. Well, that's the problem you brought up, is like if you know the instructions come from those few events, then it's an appeal to authority. It's like, oh, this is the way it's handled because I was told at nationals this is the way it's handled. I've always felt it's been really important to document the approaches as much as possible, and I know Pokemon doesn't want to document them too much because then that can put a restraint on what judges do. But I think it's something we're working toward in getting that guidance consistently, and I think we've gotten some good guidance on some of the delicate issues that we've had come up recently, and help give people some guidance on how to handle those types of things.
Yeah, it's still
like Marnie and
the tag team trainers. that was kind of weird to handle.
Yeah. So I mean, that's one of the things that we've been having with the COVID lockdown. They've been hosting online seminars on the Professor Discord, which if you're a professor watching this, you should join that Discord because you get to discuss all kinds of issues with your peers. And as we've been talking about, one of the things that are important is the consistency in how things are handled around the world. So if you're discussing it with your peers around the world, you can help guide that consistency. So they've been holding these seminars, professor seminars, officially sanctioned, which is great, on the Discord. Unfortunately, the attendance is rather limited, about 50 people per session, plus or minus. And it's one of the reasons I do these videos, to try to get a wider audience. I don't know if I'm succeeding in reaching a wider audience or not, but at least I try. But the more we can get through various means a consistent approach out for people, so that people can have a consistency around the world. That's a great thing. Where do you see things going now, Yves? How? I mean, obviously we're in a kind of a shutdown for now. Supposedly we're going to have Worlds again next year at London. Hopefully, I really would love to go.
Same here.
Fingers crossed, yeah. But assuming things are eventually going to get back on track, how do you see, how well have we accomplished? How well have you and organized play accomplished consistency around the globe, or what kind of things do you think still need work?
First, the successes of the story so far, I think it's that we at least in every major market, we have one or two people that are fully capable of running a tournament on their own. That's been a thing that had been tried to be established. I think one of the latest ones, like Richard Chong from New Zealand. So right now we have very capable people in almost every market. There are markets that have really surprised me in ways that I had no idea at the time. Brazil has a lot of judges that are extremely good and capable. And we have a lot of other Latin American judges. We have guys in Argentina, guys in Chile, guys in Peru. It has exploded in a very positive way. The next step that we need to take is use that foothold that we currently have and prepare more judges in each region. One thing that we saw from the online seminars is that there was a lot of people that were not necessarily part of larger organized play efforts, but wanted to improve. And also it was great for networking. It's very hard. I always tell people, like, hey, if you have a question or something, just message me. I mean, sometimes the messages get trapped, or sometimes I will forget. I'm not perfect. But in general, I know that it's harder for people to approach other judges, especially judges that have been around for longer, if they have not had any previous interaction with. So these seminars really help them to be able to at least know, hey, I've already talked with him, so now that I have this question or I am curious about this, now I feel more confident about reaching out. But that is definitely the next step. We need more judges and more tier 2 tournament level judges in those places. I'd love to see more size in the judge pool in these Latin American places. Oceania has done an amazing work in increasing their judge base. I would love to see more New Zealand judges. We have organized efforts in Africa, in South Africa. We have some in the United Emirates Arabs. And we have some organized play in Israel. We had a little bit of effort in Russia, which are not countries that have yielded high-level judges yet. But I hope that it's just a matter of time. I would love to see some of those guys at Worlds at some point. COPS is right now the level in which the training needs to start happening. One of the things that I like more about the new guidelines that we have is getting rid of the tiers of tournaments, because that artificially created a wall in which we would have judges that would have judged 20, 30 League Cups, and then they would jump into regionals, and regionals would be a totally different ballgame because the penalties get escalated, because the handling is a little bit different. By taking out that wall?
Well, I don't know. I think the difference between smaller events and regionals is a lot more than the penalty levels. I think it's the total way that the teams are constructed. I mean, smaller events, you have a small team of 3 or 4 people probably, whereas regionals, your team is dozens of people.
That's true.
I think that's probably a bigger culture shock.
Oh no, totally. And you want them to. And for example, I think that the really good training grounds right now is the Cups at a regional. Like, it's a medium-sized tournament. It's not the main event.
Right.
It's kind of like the equivalent of
that's a good point. But yeah, so you have a cup event, but you have the infrastructure around there, so you can get a bit of a taste of both.
Yeah, and it's not going to be as cutthroat as the regional would be, but also it's going to have at least 100 to 200 players, which is more than your average cup, but it's not going to be the 900 player tournament that regional is going to be.
But you also have access to support that you wouldn't have at a regular cup.
And you have the safety net of the judges of the main event still being there.
Right.
So it's kind of trying to get what we can from the place that we can. So that's kind of like the way that we're currently heading into, I think.
No, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about the big side events at regionals being a good training ground.
And same thing, like for example at Worlds, the alternate event, we have changed names and structure of that for every time almost. Like now it's the Open, it used to be Last Chance Qualifier, then it was like, I think it was called ST something. So it gets morphed, but it's always kind of like a good place to keep training people. Like when they are ready to go from high middle level into like really high, send them into those tournaments, and then they get all the support that World Championship has on a 1,000 people tournament.
Sounds good. All right. Anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think that I would, as usual, tell players to remember that judging is difficult. We really try our hardest to provide a service for you guys, and I know that we have been at odds with players for some time, especially since we changed into regionals that pay out tons of money. It become a little bit harder because stakes are higher, so emotions are higher, and we're still working at some of the events for a little too long, and we can make mistakes and stuff like that. Just be mindful that we are not there to try to dampen your experience. We're there to try to enhance your experience. We're trying our best to make it a fun event for everyone. We are not going away with thousands of dollars, neither in product nor in money or anything. Like I think I can count with the fingers in my hands and with leftover fingers how many events I've come out and not being on the red. But we are there for 12, 14 hours a day. We really are vested and are interested in making sure that guys are having a good time. So just be mindful of that. I know that it's difficult, especially when emotions are really high. Just try to be mindful that judges are human, that we're trying our best, and just don't try to demonize your judges as much as sometimes has happened, and try to understand that we are both in this together. We are kind of like a team.
And in the same vein, I'll also say to judges, don't be afraid to ask for help or advice when you're at an event, because same thing, we're part of a team. You're not out there on your own, and you're not looked at badly for looking for help. If anything, you're looked at badly for not looking for help.
Yes, I think that the thing that I've mentioned, I try to mention this at every seminar, is that don't be afraid of making a mistake, and don't try to hide mistakes.
Right.
People
Everyone makes mistakes.
Yes, and mistakes are going to happen. It's just the nature of this. It's important for people to understand that people do get invited back even if they make mistakes. It's important for people to understand that what the company usually looks for in judges, more than perfect knowledge of rules and handling of the situation, is good team players. We can work through not knowing all the stuff, and we can work through handling some of the stuff. What we cannot work around is not being able to work with someone. As long as you're open and you're there to be a team player, and that's the most important trait, because we can teach you through that one. What we cannot teach you through is not being a good team player.
Sounds great. Well, that's a good place to end. I want to thank Yves for joining us today. We were recording, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. We're recording this the couple of days before July 4th. This would be the weekend where we would normally have the U.S. International Championship. So,
Yeah.
So we're both going through a little bit of withdrawal. And I just want to thank Yves for spending a little time with me and helping alleviate some of that. What do they call it? Pokemon.
The blues?
Pokemon blues.
The post-event blues.
Must be it's Marill then. Poke Blue. Marill.
The Marill. That's a good one.
All right. Thank you, Yves. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.